Pressure Cookers brought to you by our friends at KINeSYS Performance Sunscreen. All right, welcome to Pressure Cooker. We're back for another week. We got three amazing players and Jared and myself. We got Kyle Yates, Sarah Ansboury, and Andrea Koop joining us today for Pressure Cooker. We have a lot of topics to cover. Obviously, we had last weekend the U.S. Open, and we had the PPA out in California, which was amazing. Everybody here had an amazing week in one way or another. And let's just jump right into it because on the way to an amazing run out at the PPA, Sarah we had some issues with paddle. And obviously this is going on everywhere, right? So the idea of delamination, whatever that means, but a paddle malfunction. So unfortunately, the first week we had testing, which I think we all thought was a good thing, that they're getting, a handle on this. Nobody's going to have an advantage. But the first week you had this, you were caught in the mix. You played your quarterfinal match. And at the completion of that, having won that match against Lena and Lacey, you and Jill Braverman beat them. And then at the end of that match, it was determined that your paddle had failed and you were forfeited for that match.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. I kind of, hopefully I summarized it properly. What happened? Tell us, how did that all go down and how are we feeling?
I mean, it's pretty, wow. I mean, you said it very nicely. We all got tested with our paddles. I had two paddles that got tested, and I had one that this paddle's just released. So I've had it for about a month, and they actually were releasing at the U.S. Open. So they did have some of the shipment to the U.S. Open. And, I told Gamma, I was like, I have one paddle. I have one paddle. I don't have anything else. I desperately need a paddle. And I know Riley was in the same boat. And so someone from Gamma had took two off the shelf at the U.S. Open and mailed them directly to us. And so that's how we went at that. And I think, before the quarterfinal match, when I was told, it was deteriorating. I asked a lot of questions. I think I really wanted to know what that meant. And I wanted to know what the possibilities were. And I mean, I kind of geek out about this kind of stuff. So I really wanted to be aware of what to handle and what to look for. And so I had a long conversation with Carl about, should I play with it? Should I not play with it? What are my options here, essentially? And he said, well, it's passing. So it's a legal paddle. And so we look, I was like, so I can play with it. And he said, yeah. He said, and he kind of told me, he's like, pay attention to the sound. If it starts sounding kind of funny. And he showed me how to do a quarter test or a flashlight test to check the noise and all that. And really the only reason I used that paddle over the other one is because I hadn't re-gripped it properly. So I didn't bring the right grips with me because I didn't think I was actually going to have another paddle. So when I was switching it over, I was just used to this paddle. So that was the one I played with because I just didn't think anything of it. I thought I've been playing with it for this long, and there wasn't any idea of when could this happen. So, I even talked to Jill about it. I said, I'm trying to, if you hear anything, let me know. And so I in between, I was actually checking it and testing it just to see if I heard anything. And I didn't feel like it played any differently. So I honestly was ridiculously surprised at the end of that match that they were challenging it, because all of the paddles had just been tested. And I was like, there's no way that the paddle is going to deteriorate in one match. I just didn't see that as a possibility. And so it was honestly ridiculously shocking. They took Jill and I aside to explain it to us. And, they told me where Jill's paddle tested compared to my paddle. And we brought up the fact that the grit, Carl brought up that the groove and paddle Jillian plays with is super gritty and way grittier than mine. And so he's like, well, you could play with that as a backup. And because I think he originally thought it was my paddles too. So I think there was a little bit of confusion there. And so, it is what it is. So I think we were just we were just completely shocked about the whole situation. It was not the expectation. I think we'd been practicing really hard. And so that was really disappointing for us because this is our first tournament together. And both of us have really stepped up our games and tried to make adjustments in our games. And so I guess that's the frustrating part is, I feel a little bit as I was playing a little bit differently. And so maybe that attributed to the reason of the challenge. And I could be super upset, and in a lot of ways I am, just because I'm disappointed in the whole situation. I don't put blame on anybody. I don't think, I see, I'm a contract player pro for PPA. I see that we're on the same team. I don't think that there's any type of negative thing there. Like, I don't see any type of stress from that side of things. I do feel like everyone's trying to manage it. We've been in communication for the last 2 days, the PPA and myself, and Gamma and myself. And I've talked with the engineers on the phone with Gamma yesterday, and and I know the whole world is talking about it, and it is what it is. So it's frustrating. And so what I'm just trying to do, I think, like all of us, is we're trying to focus on North Carolina. And, I told Gamma, I said, I need about like 10 new paddles apparently. So I just need to make sure I've got those paddles in my hands before I step on the court again. So,
yeah. So obviously that didn't go well. Andrea, how did you feel about the whole testing process? Is it a positive? Obviously Sarah got the short end of this one, but are we moving in the right direction?
We're definitely moving in the right direction. When the paddles delaminate, it's a safety issue for all the players. It's a safety issue on the amateur circuit as well. So, but I think it starts with the pros. As manufacturers start seeing, unfortunately, players like Sarah getting defaulted from a really big, important match, that sends a message to them, and they need to get it right. Manufacturers need to make sure that this issue is resolved, not just for Sarah, myself, Kyle, all the rest of us, but for the millions of amateurs that are playing with their paddles, because it is a safety issue.
Kyle, what do you think?
Oh, it's just a wiffle ball. Come on, people. It's just a wiffle ball. Put some goggles on. You'll be fine. What's the worst that could happen? No, obviously I'm kidding. My biggest concern with this whole thing is the fact that Sarah and Jillian were the ones that were punished, because the person who's really at fault here is the manufacturers and USA Pickleball for not being on top of this. If they know some of these paddle models are breaking down, delaminating as they're calling it, and turning illegal after just a couple weeks or a month, or just hitting it with a hammer, then they just need to take that paddle off the market entirely until they can resolve this issue. So that's my biggest thing. So obviously, yeah, good for PPA for at least now testing paddles and making sure players aren't able to use these illegal paddles. But can we nip this in the bud before it even gets to the players' hands? Because Sarah and Jillian shouldn't be the ones punished for this. She obviously isn't aware of how the paddles are made and how they break down and how they turn it illegal. And so why is she the one being punished? So I would be furious if it happened to me. I know the U.S. Open took a different stance. I was in a different tournament this weekend where I was afraid to even challenge my opponent's paddle because they had a rule in place where I could lose. I could have to forfeit my matches because their paddle might be somewhat legal.
You'd be out for a year.
Yeah, I would be suspended for a year. And I had to play against the exact same paddles that Sarah was using, other players were using. So I might have been playing against illegal paddles there too, but I wasn't able to even challenge it and uphold the integrity myself. So someone else has to step in before the players to take it out of our hands, because it shouldn't be up to us first and foremost.
Yeah, I mean, so two completely opposite takes on this, right? U.S. Open basically said, we don't know what to do, so we're going to make it a fine, and you're going to be banned for a year if you say anything. And over here, we're going to proactively test everything, and we're going to make decisions based on that. Jared, what do you think?
Well, first I want to say, Sarah, I think you handled this very admirably. I think the messages that you posted, and the kind of how quickly you got a statement out, I think was the right way to do it. I have two questions. What was the score? It's totally irrelevant. What was the score of that match? Because I looked on pickleball tournaments.
I honestly can't remember. I think it was like 11-6, 11-9. I know, like, we were down in the second game 6-9, and then we won it 11-9. So it was in two. That so it I mean, yeah.
It's regardless of how, it's a great win.
Yeah.
And it's a bummer. But also, I guess I'm curious, like, are you pissed at Gamma? Did you have a conversation of seriously, like if I'm in your shoes, and I think Kyle's right, like it's either it's the manufacturer or it's the paddle company.
Hold on one second. Yeah, I just want to separate the manufacturer and the brand are
They're
two
different,
different
right.
things, right?
But there has to be quality control. And I've talked to a lot of paddle owners who say like, they're like, well, this isn't going to happen to us because we have quality control. We've been working with these factories for, 15, 20 years. We know that they're going to do the right thing. So were you pissed?
I mean, I can't lie. I was a little bit pissed, but I think I don't. That's just not who I am. Like, I'm not the person that's going to be pissed off and put blame on people. It's just not. Like, I've been in pickleball for a while, and I understand. Like, I remember when we couldn't play with paddles with any texture. I mean, that's how Kyle and I learned pickleball. Like, I mean, that's like. It's a brand new world because of all this technology, and is it good? Is it not good? I don't know, because I could be mad at Gamma. Absolutely. I think, but I also, 6 other paddle companies tested the same when they were tested for the quarterfinals, and that was not Gamma only. So it isn't an issue just with Gamma. I think that's really important to know. And even I did talk to Carl about this because he knows like the engineer Chuck from Gamma, and Gamma has always played it safe. And I think that was the joke that we were all making was Gamma of all companies. Come on. Like they're not exactly known to be hot paddles. Like it's the first carbon paddle they've ever made. Like, and so I was on the call with a bunch of people trying to explain what happened, and they're trying to understand what's wrong with the paddle. And I absolutely made fun of them for it. So it's the only way that I can kind of look at it, because I think what's happening is we have so many paddle companies trying to break this industry, and you've just got, there's like 130 different carbon paddles right now. That's insane. So when you have these companies, they're all trying to compete with each other. They're all trying to make the best product, and they're trying to do the best for their players. I mean, let's be real, because I know like Gamma, it's like to keep their players, they have to make paddles that are competitive, that are going to win that match, or going to at least stay in it. Because the reality is when you have like, the pro pickleball world, like it does make a difference when you've got a bunch of carbon paddles out there with a lot of pop and all that kind of stuff. It's a different game that we play now than anybody else. And this is why some of these illegal paddles are actually, going on with amateurs, is because they're looking for something different and fun and all that. And so I understand that factor, that like the companies are really just trying their best to make their players happy, to make their brand happy. And we don't have all the answers. I think in the same with the testing, like we don't have all of those answers. I was very clear when I was asked, I said, I want to know, how much over the limit, what are these things like that we go, because I do think the more that we as players understand, like what it is we're looking for, like what are those things, then maybe we can help in that. But I 100% agree with Kyle that at the end of the day, we're here to play pickleball. Like that's our job. Our job is to show up on the court and to represent our brand and to do the best that we can. Our job is not to, determine all of these other factors. That's why we have managers and agents and like the tours, they're all taking care of these things for us so that we can focus on playing. So as much as I can hold on to this and be angry with this, like really what I have to focus on is North Carolina, in a week or two. So like, that's how I choose to do it. I choose to look at it like, how are we all as a group gonna move forward from this, and what does that mean, for testing? I do know that PPA is talking about adjusting some of the way the rules are written, and they are trying to find that, because I said, so what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to say, hey, test my paddle every 6 points? Like, because that's insane. Like, it's insane for us to say, when is that moment? Like, did it happen at 9-9? Did it happen at 1-0 in the second? Like, when was it that paddle became illegal? And it's putting us players in a position that we're having to call each other out. And I've stood across the net and wanted to challenge someone's paddle and decided not to do it, because I don't think it's the player's fault. I don't think it's and you don't want to be wrong. Like you don't want to like put that integrity on somebody and say, hey, I lost a match, and so I'm going to challenge your paddle. Like, I think that's not our jobs. It's just, it's too much for us to ask, because at the end of the day, we have so much on our plate in the first place that, that I just want to show up and play and focus on that. And to make fairness and equalness, I'm all for that. I firmly believe that paddle testing has been a need for quite some time. I know that, like, I talked to USA Pickleball about this like 4 years ago, and like we weren't even close at that point in time. So I do think these are bigger strides that we're making, even though it really sucks for myself and Jill. So right now.
Before passing it over to Jason, who, by the way, is probably the biggest paddle nerd that I know. I mean, he knows more about paddles than probably Curtis Smith at Paddle Tech and some of the other geeks out there. But I will say, I just got off kind of facilitating the podcast with Anna Bright and Dylan Frazier, and Dylan's paddle got tested several times, and he was in the same kind of situation. And so I just want everyone to know that this is happening widespread. Like, there are multiple players who are in a similar boat. And I think, I asked Dylan, I said, how would you know when to switch it? He said, I would just had to listen. And the second that I thought it was bad, then I would have just switched it out. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think the technology, I'm all for innovation, but I think it's moving too quickly. And in the USA Pickleball and the PPA, they're not equipped yet to move at this pace. And I don't really blame them. I just think, like, there's so much stuff happening in Asia with all these manufacturers that it's concerning. And I don't really love to see the pace, but I also do like to see the innovation. So it's kind of a catch-22.
So Andrea, let's go to you. How do we feel about the rules and the testing that are in place, and what can we do to improve them? Any thoughts?
Listen, it's brand new at the PPA, and I hope that it becomes pro circuit wide. It's just embraced. But I definitely agree with Kyle in that, maybe a certain paddle, not like a brand, and we shouldn't say Gamma as a whole, but if Gamma or Paddle Tech or any of them, Diadem, any of them have a paddle that is consistently failing, maybe it just needs to be taken out, and players can't play with it. And we start with that at the pro level, and it's easy. You can even do it at the amateur level too. You just say, look, that paddle, it doesn't matter that it's got the USA Pickleball approved on there. It's just not allowed here. We know that there's some manufacturer quality control issues, and we're taking it out of this tournament. And tournament directors have the ability to do that. I know that, people don't like it, but I run the Beer City Open, and people don't like it when tournament directors make different decisions, but there is a catch-all rule that basically says tournament directors are God. They can do whatever they want. So we don't like it when they do that, but this safety issue, and it would send a strong message. And like Kyle said, it would take it out of, Sarah, the player, Andrea, the player's hands. MLP just did their data testing. So MLP knows, or supposedly knows, who the 6 outlier paddle brands were. Again, I keep using brands lightly. I don't mean like Selkirk as a whole or Paddle Tech as a whole. Whatever the 6 paddles are, they're not necessarily one company, but they know, and they're keeping it quiet, and we don't know. But I feel like that should be public, because it's not to shame them. It's just to say, You got to get it right.
Yeah. And Kyle, before I go to you, Beer City Open sold out in 15 minutes today. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Kyle, what do you think?
On the
how
whole,
can we improve? Well, how can we improve? What could be done better?
Well, I'm curious how they test these paddles to begin with, because Sarah's paddle was tested before the tournament started, and then a couple matches later they tested again and it failed. And again with the U.S. Open, with me,
it was actually one match.
One match. So it passed, and then a match later it failed. I'm curious how accurate the tests are. So that was my biggest concern playing the U.S. Open, because I know for a fact some players were using illegal paddles this week at the U.S. Open, but it was so risky to challenge
would you like to say their names?
I'm not going to share names, but I know for a fact several players used delaminated paddles, and they knew they were delaminated, and they even said, no one's going to risk challenging it. And it's true, because who knows, they might test it, and however the test comes out, it might barely pass somehow on that particular test, and then I have to forfeit all my prize money and my gold medal. And then they test it again another way and it might fail. So I don't know how accurate these tests are anyways. But if there's any paddles that are consistently failing and they're aware that these paddles fail, just get them out of there. Get them out of there. I think if you send a strong enough message, the manufacturers, or at least the paddle companies, will get on top of this. They're not willing to risk, forfeiting that much money over something like this. They'll keep a tighter rein on it.
Yeah. The strongest message that was sent was to the players at the U.S. Open: do not challenge paddles.
But that's also that. I mean, that
can't be the solution.
That's ridiculous.
It's definitely not the solution.
There's so many inconsistencies that like it, and even like Leia, right, who challenged Salome's paddle, and whether it was right or wrong or however it went down, I just think that like it shouldn't be in the players' hands to have to do that. It creates a lot of bad blood. Like Sarah said, you guys have so much on your plate as is, to have to be worrying about that. There's just no other sport that I know of, professional sport, where that is the case, and they have to fix this.
Sure. And referees, if I could add one or two, referees are starting to train for hearing the sound of the delaminated paddles, because some of the paddles, they just sound different. They sound hollow. They sound more like a racket. It's like that deeper sound. So they're starting to get on top of it too, because for me as a player, I wasn't going to challenge my opponent's paddle. It might, I wouldn't do that either. Sarah said she wouldn't do that out of, just respect for the person. But, a referee should be able to get on top of that. Hey, that thing sounds different than that other, so-and-so has the exact same paddle and sounds different. So there's other ways to get around it without putting it in the player's hands to make that call.
I think that in some sports, maybe like F1, if you finish in the top 3, your car is automatically inspected at the end of the race. We could implement something like that instead of it being your paddles. They're already doing it now. PPA says you get to the quarterfinals, you go right, get your paddles tested. Well, maybe when you come off the court, you get your paddle tested. Regardless, everyone does. It's just so there's no challenging, because I do think that, and I'm not calling them out, there was nothing unsportsmanlike about it. It's within the rules, but it's a bad look if you lose a match and you challenge. You look like a sore loser. You could look like a sore loser. So if it's just in the rules, everyone brings their paddles from quarterfinals on. You get it tested before the match. You get it tested after the match. You get it tested before the semifinals. You just do it. Then it's out of the players' hands.
Y'all are 3 total OGs of the sport, and when I came into the sport, you're like 3 of the first names that I ever saw. And would you ever imagine that this would be the case, that these things would be occurring?
I think that's a natural progression for every sport. I think you see it in all sports. Major League Baseball just got a PED policy in like 2011, right? Or something crazy. It wasn't that long ago, and it's been around for 100 years. So I think as all sports evolve and grow, issues, arise, especially as major money comes in, not necessarily from the professional level, but these paddle manufacturers are competing against each other for the market share. There's major money in paddle sales.
Yeah. I think it's, I think honestly, I did think we would get here at some point because we saw those issues like early on. As soon as paddles started to develop texture and all that kind of stuff, it was here. The issues were there. And I think it just opened up this massive can of worms. Like kind of like you said, it's like technology is great because our sport is growing. However, maybe it is growing too fast because we've seen that in the tours. We've seen that in MLP, like just the growth overall, tournaments, leagues, everything. And it's impossible, I think, for everybody to catch up. And you have all these new companies coming in and trying to do something. And so, I think honestly, and I told USA Pickleball this years ago, like we should get to the point where we should test every single match from the first one. And then, I think if it tests legally for a match, then that match is good, but test it again for the next match. And then if it's not good for the next match, then it's out. But I think if you test it again at the end of the match, again, you're kind of still putting that, like the player into a position that it's like you'd be afraid to play with anything. If there's a possibility of it going over or anything like that, like I would be nervous on what paddle I would took if I could get matches taken away from me so easily.
Yeah, I think it's a great solution. Test it. You're being tested. Everything at the quarterfinals is being tested. If you pass, it's good for that next match. If it happens to delaminate in the middle of that,
Yeah.
hey, it's going to be a crapshoot anyway, right? And then the next match, you're going to be tested before. If it goes over, you'll have it removed. And
Or maybe there's like a limit to what it can be closeness to the delamination, where if it's at 90%, then you can't use it.
When I think that's, what we spoke about too, is they're like, we have no idea how fast it does it. Like, we have no idea, like the tests are still so new that they're still learning about all these things. It is that technology that, we don't know as much about yet. And I know that they are really working on it. And so once that becomes, I think, a little bit more consistent, then it'll be great. But I think, Kyle said it, we just don't know enough about the technology and the testing as of this moment. And I think that's a tricky side of it.
Okay, moving on. U.S. Open last weekend, amazing event. Jared and I were both lucky enough to attend and saw Kyle just rack up the golds. What does the U.S. Open mean to the pros today? What does it mean to amateurs? Kyle, what does it mean to you to win the U.S. Open again?
Well, for me, it's got a lot more nostalgia. Obviously, it was the first real major. It was the first real tournament that just felt like a professional event in my eyes. Even back when the first U.S. Open in 2016, Nationals was still at an RV park, and they finally had a cool stadium court, and you just got that vibe that pickleball was going places. And obviously, I feel like my career kind of kicked off then with the U.S. Open, and that's where most of my big wins came and best memories. So for me, that tournament is a little more special. But it really is such a fun atmosphere. It really is. Obviously, a lot of the top pros weren't there, but the center court was sold out every single day, all day. Tons of energy. It was bigger. The facility keeps getting better every year. So it's, and the prize money was a lot bigger than I expected. It was actually doubled from last year. And I know they're looking to add even more for next year. So, I think a lot of people are knocking it or find ways to kind of bash it or talk it down, but man, it's still Naples. They put on a great party. They really do.
For sure. What about Andrew? What's your take on U.S. Open? Is it something that you could see playing in the future? I know that this year the PPA players did not, but is there a path forward to getting back there?
I'm not in the PPA negotiating room, but I only have a 1-year deal with the PPA. I don't know what will happen in my pickleball career at the end of this year. I run the Beer City Open. I'm all about independent tournaments succeeding. I love the fact that it was sold out every day. I love that Kyle and Althoff put on a show, not together, but individually. I love that for the U.S. Open. I love that for pro pickleball. It's great. And that there were 3,000 amateurs playing. That's good for the sport. It's good for pro pickleball, regardless of whether PPA players were there.
Sarah, what about you? You're not a contracted PPA player, right?
No, I am.
You are. Okay. So you were obligated to be in California. Got it. Okay.
Correct.
So what do you think?
I think, Kyle's right in a sense that, like, when he said that, it reminded me of the first finals, like the first mixed doubles finals, and being on that court and like, I remember I was playing with Daniel Moore, and he looked at me, he's like, can you believe this? Like, he's like, I remember him saying it to me. He's like, I'll never forget this moment. And it is true, because that was like, it was finally like that you could see that the sport was going somewhere. And for those of us who were playing tournaments before there was pro, then that's kind of a big deal. It's like, I remember Kyle and I playing Kelowna, Canada, and we made $0. It's just like, and we won gold. Like, it's just like, and so to go from like where we were to those things, and I had a lot of friends, I had a lot of students of mine that were at the U.S. Open. So I'm checking the draws every day. I'm talking to the players, and like, and I would ask, what's the atmosphere like? And they said it's bigger, like it's bigger than it even was last year. So I think, I had a lot of my players that I coach, it was their first US Open, and it is a big deal. Like, and whatever that looks like in the future, who knows what that's going to look like. But you can't fault in any way what Chris and Terry have done for this sport, and what Naples has done for the sport, not just for the professionals, but for amateurs. And so I think that's I don't think that's going anywhere to a certain extent. Like Andrea said, like I'm a firm believer in independent tournaments. Like it's the tours are not the end all be all, because let's be real. There's a million other tournaments out there that are great tournaments, and they're a lot of fun. Like, I mean, it's what matters is pickleball is just getting better and better and better.
For sure. You know, let's switch tack and go to an incident that happened at the PPA this week.
I want to chime in on the U.S. Open.
Go chime in. Go ahead, Jared. Your favorite tournament.
It's my favorite tournament. Connor hates when I say that. Too bad, Connor. It's the first tournament I ever went to. I get like nervous going there. I think it's cool that outside of center championship court, all the pros are playing on the same type of courts. I like that all the courts are dedicated. They're all fenced in. I think they're all fenced in. There's not balls flying everywhere. The vibe is great. The amateurs are super into it. The exhibitor hall, I think it's the best. I just love it. I love the fanfare and the flag ceremonies, and I think it's a really special event. And I hope that any pro that wants to play can play there in the future.
Yeah, and I also think that it's so unique in the fact that there are no other venues like that until about now. I mean, I feel like things are being built out. The infrastructure is getting bigger. People are building out facilities that can accommodate. I saw one in Nevada for 128 courts or something ridiculous. So we're going to start seeing scale in pickleball, which could accommodate potentially thousands and thousands of amateurs playing at these massive, large-scale tournaments, which is super exciting about what the future holds. We'll see how it all plays out. But I did want to go to the PPA this week. There was an incident with Pablo Tellez and a fan. Pablo obviously was essentially being harassed from all reports, pretty aggressive fan behavior, and Pablo flicked him the bird on the way out. He was fined for that. But where do we draw the line on fan behavior at these events? Sarah, what's your thought? Have you experienced any,
And does anyone know what happened? Does anyone know what went down for the people that were there?
I just heard it might have been a little out of control, the fan.
The fan
and it would
too much to drink.
Yeah, that's what I heard. So I will say I've dealt with it many times, and mostly at the U.S. Open, honestly. So I will tell you that, I mean, I am kind of floored by what fans are able to do and willing to do. I've literally walked off of a court not feeling safe before, and I don't think that's okay. And that's happened multiple times in my career where I've been afraid of something happening and there's no one there to do anything about it. And I think you have to protect your players. And as much as these fans are great, and 99.9% of fans are amazing, they're incredible. I absolutely love pickleball people, but there is that little percent that maybe they drink too much and they don't know what's going on, and they just, it happens. It's happened at MLP before, and I've been very close to slapping an owner in the face, and but I'm not going to do that because it's just it's not our responsibility to be managing fans. It's not our responsibility to feel safe on the court. I think that's the responsibility of the referees and the tournaments and those types of things. And I think that just like paddles and all this, that we all just need to learn to respect each other. And so that we can all, again, just enjoy the sport. Because at the end of the day, we're just playing pickleball. It's a wiffle ball after all.
Yeah. Kyle, what have you ever had any experience like that?
Oh yeah. I've been in some hostile situations leaving courts. And with opponents and with fans, but in pickleball, one of the coolest things about pickleball is how accessible the players are to the fans. but also one of the worst things about pickleball is how accessible players are to the fans. In a few ways. I mean, they're so close to the bench, especially the MLP. You have people in the stands sitting where they could reach out and touch me, kind of thing. But that whole PPA situation, I know PPA actually incites that kind of behavior. They want it to be rowdy, they want it to be loud and a lot of energy. And as much as I love that, they still have to keep a rein on it. I mean, some of the things that these people were saying. One, Pablo got a blue card at MLP because the guy in the crowd was saying some not nice things about Pablo's mother. And then again, here at the PPA, these guys are going a little too far. And I don't think referees stepped in and did enough about it because it was happening the entire match. So, it's one of those things where pickleball's transitioning into it's not so much just a bunch of country club people watching and just kind of clapping. It's getting a lot louder and a lot more energized. And we just need to kind of keep the etiquette as much as we can. And try to find where we can draw that line.
Yeah, Andrew, what is the etiquette? Because I don't think it's actually been established. I feel like we're teetering between tennis, golf, and
I think
MMA.
it's got to be the party hole, but the party hole at the Waste Management, because we're not tennis. But I don't think we're not tennis. We're not. I don't think we should embrace the country club sport because we're not. So that's what I say, the party hole at the Waste Management golf tournament. But last weekend at PPA, and for all of you who don't know, Pablo Tejas is like the nicest guy out there. He is so calm. The fact that he's got a blue card and now this happened, like this is basically like Sarah Ansbury's paddle failing. This is the equivalent of that. It's just not the person that you're going to peg for that to happen. And in no way I'm not blaming Tyson. Tyson is great. Tyson's wonderful. He's got some really loyal fans and he interacts with the fans, and the PPA, they encourage that. And I think it helps him play even better. But in that last weekend, Don Stanley's got to step in. The referee has got to step in, and the fans were saying some pretty horrific things to Pablo and Fed out there, mostly Pablo, and the refs have got to stop that. They've just got to say, no, you're out, sir. I mean, if Pablo can get a blue card, how come a fan can't?
And also, I wonder, even at a PPA event, would it behoove them to have a couple of, it doesn't even need to be real security guards, but a couple of guys in yellow jackets that say security on the back of it? I feel like just a presence, because I don't see any security at these events.
Hannah Johns acted as security. Give credit where credit's due.
Right. Fair enough. Yeah, but I mean, I feel like maybe a little bit more muscle.
Are you saying that Hannah doesn't have muscle? Come on.
She has claws.
I'm saying a little more.
Hannah can be fierce. Hannah can be fierce, actually.
Exactly.
Jared, any thoughts on the fan behavior? I've seen you get a little rowdy at times.
I mean, I think it's bullshit. I think other fans should step in. Again, that's not the fans' responsibility. But if you hear people, I've heard racial stuff was kind of being thrown, which is total bullshit. Like, if I heard that, and I was there, I would have. I would like to think I would have stepped in. I don't know Pablo super well, but the interactions I've had with him, he seems like a lovely guy. So that seems really bad. And I think Jason on the agenda is to talk about gambling. I really worry about gambling, as Kyle was saying and Sarah was alluding to. Like, you're so close to the fans, and when a fan loses $10,000 because you missed a dink, I really worry about the safety of players. I heard.
Yeah,
I mean, I can show you my inbox from this weekend, by the way, and it's not pretty entirely. I've been threatened multiple times just from this paddle situation. So,
right, and that's crazy.
You can post those in the kitchen if you want, or just tell me who it is and I'll block them. Just that works.
Obviously that's terrible that's happening, but I do worry that when we throw some fuel on that fire with gambling, and now it's not just emotions that are running high. Now it's real currency. It's going to, I just want to make sure that the players and these leagues are prepared for what is to come. That security is there, that maybe there's a bit of a buffer between the fans and the players. And also the players are properly prepared from a social media standpoint, from, making sure that they have those safeguards up, that their emails aren't all over the place and that their addresses aren't made public. And, you know, just starting to think about, because it's coming, how do we button these things up? You know, Andrea, are you ready for that?
I don't know if I'm ready for it. I'm not that out there on social media, but you can find me in my law office. That's pretty public. The address is public. No, but I think, you know, it's important to say that the fans are awesome. Like 99% of them are awesome. And we want, at least I want, a rowdy atmosphere. Like I think pickleball should be closer to an NBA game atmosphere than a tennis court atmosphere. That being said, like, you know, racist language, swearing at a player, none of that is okay. You can be having a good time, clapping, yelling, screaming. I mean, screaming, yelling, clapping, even noise during the point. I think I'm not sure where I'm at on that. Sometimes I'm like, that's really annoying as a player, and sometimes I'm like, that's great as a fan experience. And we're not tennis. We should embrace not being tennis. And it's, you know, Dylan and Fed and a bunch of the guys went to the NBA playoff in the Laker game last weekend, and I'm sure it was loud the whole time in there, and the fans are loving it. So I do think that there's a fine line in that atmosphere that pickleball's got to embrace. And, you know, so we shouldn't be saying because this happened, all of a sudden we need to go back and be super quiet and be a tennis court atmosphere, because we're not that.
We need more crazy Cathys. If everyone could just be a crazy Cathy, we'd be.
Kathy's amazing.
Kathy's great.
Yep.
Kyle, are we ready for gambling in pickleball?
No, not at all. I mean, not when I can make way more money just losing a match than I would winning it.
For sure.
You know, I think adding money in the sport is a very dangerous thing. I mean, Sarah alluded earlier, we used to play tournaments for no prize money, and it was fun. You know, you'd lose and you'd go grab a beer and you stick around and you'd watch the finals. So it's just getting more and more intense, and tempers are going to flare, and it's just, you know, we got to be careful, because we don't want pickleball to lose its luster, which is that community atmosphere, right? Which there's already some bad blood between some people on tour, and it's kind of sad. Obviously, I want to make more money, but at the same time, in moderation. I think we go overboard, we might lose some of the finer things about pickleball.
Sarah, what about you? You think we're ready for gambling in pickleball?
Not sure we have a choice, to be honest. So I get it. I get it from a business standpoint. I get they're trying to make money, and they're trying to look for ways to pay us, to be honest. So I get that's a side of things. I agree with that, you know, if I can make more money losing a match, then, you know, that maybe causes some problems. So, you know, I also think this is a little above my pay grade, and so we'll find out where we are soon.
Yeah, and I meant more from the economic side of this, that yes, I think this will trickle down to the players. This will increase purses and paydays, and I think this is going to be beneficial to the players. It's going to come with some caveats. It's going to come with some downside as well, because it's going to put pressure. Like we heard, you know, anecdotally from tennis players, that you lose a match, people are angry, and are the players ready for that? That's my question, more on the softer side than on the financial side.
Yeah, we're talking about adding more money, but we're getting forfeited because our paddles are failing tests. You know, so there's so many things in the sport that need to be corrected and fixed before we start throwing tons more money. I mean, we had someone spinning their serve for 2 years before the governing body finally was able to stop it. I mean, there's
about me?
Yeah, exactly. You know, so there's so many growing pains in the sport right now that if we grow too fast, we throw too much money in it. There's so many ways to abuse things right now, and so I just think there's some greedy people trying to rush it, and the sport's not ready for it yet.
And talk about, like, you know, PEDs and other stuff that could become a factor. You know, you throw money. I mean, if they go gambling, there has to be cap bets. You can't have bets that are bigger than prize money. Otherwise,
They will be capped. By the way, they will be capped. These are going to be pretty.
it can't be bigger than prize than the first.
It's not even going to be close. It'll be like 1% of prize money. It'll be nothing. So it's going to be micro betting at first.
Are you
not
leading the charge on gambling? How do you know so much about this?
I've had some conversations, but it's not going to be. It's going to be essentially micro betting. So it's going to be, let's say you're spending $10-$20. It's not going to be. You're not going to be able to bet $1,000. Is Johnny Goldberg going to be
in charge of the betting?
Oh.
Johnny Goldberg he's the czar of gambling.
He is.
Bing bong.
Johnny Goldberg is a piece of work, by the way. He was like he's arguing with fans at the U.S. Open. It was crazy. Anyways,
he was just in Newport. I mean, he's always got the $20 bet going with everybody.
No, I love a bet. A $20 bet, $100 bet, but I don't know. I like
you don't make $100 bets. He's just bragging.
Me?
Yeah.
We had a big bet. We won.
All right, guys. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up. Appreciate your time so much. Thank you, Sarah. Sorry this happened to you, but hopefully the sport is going to improve because of it, and continued success. And we look forward to seeing you in North Carolina with your Gamma paddle. Will
you all be in North Carolina? Kyle, you won't be there?
Mm-mm.
Andrea?
And maybe Andrea.
Maybe. We'll see. Hopefully.
Well, speedy recovery.
Thank you.
Hope you're feeling better.
Thank you.
And Kyle, we'll see you. I'm not sure where we're going to see you next.
MLP.
Oh,
MLP.
Are you playing Sacramento this weekend, Kyle?
No, I can't. No, I'm going to Punta Cana and then Greece.
Oh, poor
so
guy.
I'm gonna be out of the country for a couple weeks.
Oh my gosh.
What about Atlanta, Kyle?
No.
Dude, Atlanta's not the same without you and Rafa on the ATP calls. I mean, come on. I'm not going either now.
No. Next one's San Clemente PPA and then MLP.
Nice. Are you
Awesome.
playing with your
All right, guys.
partners?
Thank you so much.
Are you playing with your MLP partners there?
Yes.
Awesome. Cool. Well, we'll see you soon, Kyle.
And Andrea, congrats on Beer City. And for all the kitchen listeners, we're giving away an all-expense-paid trip for 2 people, plus registration, plus flights, plus hotel to the Beer City Open. Giveaway starts Thursday. Bonus entries you can get now. I think we have the last 2 registrations on Earth. So
non-pro registration.
Good tournament. Yes. Great tournament.
Non-pro registrations.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, pros are still eligible to enter.
Correct.
Thank you so much, Sarah, Kyle, Andrew. Really appreciate y'all's time.